Terica gotta figure out what she finna do about this baby. Grandmother Ernestine is being called home. And Lil Murda and Uncle Clifford reach a new level in their relationship. What's good, y'all? It's your good sis Erica Vane coming to you right here on Erica Vane TV with another P-Valley video. And in this video, we are going to break down episode 7 from season 2 titled Jackson. And before I deep dive into this video, make sure that you did not miss my episode 6 review, breakdown, deep dive, all of that. I did an in-depth look at episode 6, which broke down all of the foreshadowing, all of the symbolism, and the story that played out in that episode in the most depth that I have done on this channel. The video will be linked in the cards above as well as the description box down below. P-Valley has not missed when it comes to storytelling this season, and episode 6 was definitely a special one. So if you missed it, go ahead and check out my breakdown for that before we get into this one. And without further ado, let's talk about episode 7. The episode opens up at Ernestine's juke joint as we take a trip down memory lane with Miss Ernestine performing every Saturday night for decades in what is now known as the Pink. It's here that we get the first glimpses of Uncle Clifford's parents, while also being drawn into the very real possibility that this could be the end for Miss Ernestine, who is fighting and seemingly losing her COVID battle. We take a trip through multiple decades, which looks like the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And in the final decade is where we get to see Uncle Clifford running through the place being chased by his mother as Grandmother Ernestine sings the house down. We are lulled back into present day as we watch a no longer blind but present day Ernestine see her deceased daughter walk into the empty Pink with her favorite drink, asking her to come with her and take a rest. Because y'all know Miss Ernestine has definitely earned it, but she's not ready yet. Now, we know that the real present day Miss Ernestine is blind, so this was like the first call to like something is wrong, something is going on here, and it's basically that Miss Ernestine is having one of those COVID dreams / hallucinations. The only other show that I saw this play out with was Grey's Anatomy, when they had Meredith have something similar, and she had to basically make a choice to keep living while she was in her dream as well. So I really thought that this was a cool way to start off the episode, and specifically the journey that we're going to see Grandmother Ernestine take as she continues her COVID fight. When we find Uncle Clifford in this episode, it happens to be in the exact same place that Dream Ernestine was in moments before, and she's reminiscing about the Pink, all that has happened there, but more so about when it was, Ernestine's juke joint, and remembering growing up there as Haley walks in for their little scheduled meeting to discuss the future of the Pink. Now, as they argue, Cliff points out that Haley isn't as altruistic as she's trying to play up. Like, she's like, oh, I'm going to do right by you and your ancestors. And it's like, girl, this ain't about Uncle Clifford or her ancestors. It's really about Haley. And it's interesting because in this conversation, we get to see a little bit deeper into what it is that Haley wants, or what it is that she's up to, because she basically communicates that she lost her daughter behind the same money that she was siphoning from Montavious, and she used this money to buy the Pink, so she can't let this all go down the drain because this is all in her daughter's name. And it's just like, girl, what? Like, how did you lose your daughter because of this money? We don't get any real clarity. We just kind of get little breadcrumbs of like, okay, there's something more, which I will say we definitely needed, because y'all already know I have not been feeling Haley for quite a while. I don't understand what she wants. I don't understand why she's doing half the shit that she's doing, and she just gets on my nerves. So with her giving a little bit more context to like what's driving her, and we get to see her have an emotional beat when she thinks about her daughter after Uncle Clifford's like, that baby's gone. It's like, okay, so this means something to you. But then also Uncle Clifford's right. That child is gone. You need to grieve and figure out what's next for you in reference to family and community, not just money. Now, I do feel like Uncle Clifford clarifying like that baby gone and this is not about, me or my ancestors is really like a setup or getting ready to set up for what Haley's story is going to be. We've been getting tons of really great backstory for various characters throughout this season, and it feels like just with this one conversation that this is going to be what spurs us into Haley's backstory in the coming episodes. Because in all honesty, it was never really made clear what happened to Haley's daughter and why. Why were they on the road during a hurricane? Or specifically, what happened that had them on the road, period, even if they were like blindsided by the hurricane, right? She says that the money was supposed to give them a new life, but it's not clear of what that actually looked like. We know that she was in an abusive relationship with Montavious. We can assume that she was trying to make a run for it when all broke loose, but nothing is really clear. And that to me goes on with us seeing Haley pop up again later on in the episode when she's at the grocery store and she basically runs up on Mississippi and Derek are at the grocery store shopping, trying to play like a normal family. Mississippi is clearly playing the role. Derek is trying his best and he's like, look, I'm trying here, Negro, which he's not a Negro, y'all, but y'all know what I mean. You ain't trying shit, okay? Like, why? Like, shut up when you talking to me, Derek. Like, I just y'all, I am like 2 seconds out my car on the way to Chuckalisa to get Mississippi's ass because I can't even take it anymore. I can't even take looking at Derek anymore. In this pedestrian ass scene where they are literally just shopping for some damn groceries, I was disgusted to my core just with looking at Derek's face and hearing words fall out of his mouth. Mississippi winds up getting away from him in a moment to go talk to Haley because, she got to go buy some more makeup because I got to cover up your beatings, your daily beatings. Raggedy ass. And Haley talks to her about, oh, I guess you didn't use the gun and you need to get out and yada, yada, yada. And I'm just like, why? Why are you randomly popping up to come and help out Mississippi after... 6 months now? The murder night happened 6 months ago. It's from the beginning of this season onward. It's been kind of like you can assume that she hasn't had any contact with her when everybody, or when Uncle Clifford and Mercedes was talking about Keyshawn when they saw her on the TV. All you said was you can't blame her, like, you never know what's going on or whatever, but it's not like you have maintained contact with her. So why are you popping up at the grocery store now? Better yet, why are you popping up and handing out cell phones so that you can help her get out? Like, not that it's wrong, right? Like, it's not wrong. Mississippi definitely needs help. So by golly, Miss Molly, somebody come and help out good sis Keyshawn. But I just don't know what Haley's motives are and why she's doing what she's doing. Like, she has proven herself, in my opinion, to be a very selfish person. Aside from her buying the pink, which ultimately seems like it was a selfish thing too. Like, she didn't do it for nobody else. So, like, while some of the consequences or some of the side effects of her decisions ultimately could help people, I don't think that that's what she actually be leading with. So I'm looking at Haley this whole episode like, girl, why are you doing this that you're doing? You were talking to Uncle Clifford and you're like, you're not going to be able to talk me out of selling. Clearly, we already know that. You already made your mind up. So then what are we sitting here talking about? Like, I don't know. If y'all are like super Haley fans or have been really following her or seem to got into her psyche and understand that girl, please drop down in the comment section and let me know what you think is on Haley's mind, what she is trying to make happen out of this whole thing. Because at the end of the day, like, if she really didn't want to choose violence, she could just go ahead and be with her little married man. He can go ahead and get a divorce. She could set up shop with his ass. She could still co-own the pink and make that thing a profitable thing. Honestly, like, let's talk about this right now. Because what I am not understanding is how in the hell did Corbin all last season make a very real point of not selling the land, not selling his family land, but leasing it so that they could have generational wealth, additional wealth, and constantly be getting paid from this versus getting some random payoff, this one big payday, and let that be it. Meanwhile, this season, he is all for the pink selling versus leasing. And Haley, you're supposed to be this big bad accountant girl with some good business ideas. You was giving out all types of business information and how Andre should set up accounts if he was going to get a kickback or do this or do that, so it wouldn't be, on the radar of the police or the government. But you kept yet to be able to fathom, like, hey, maybe y'all can franchise the pink. Maybe y'all can lease the land to Promised Land and then have the pink in the damn casino. Like, why is it so much all or nothing? Like, I just really don't understand, which is also making me not necessarily like Haley either, because it's like, girl, there are other options besides you just selling this for $10 million. I mean, $10 million is a big ass payday, but if this casino sits on this land for the next 50 years and y'all lease the land and then franchise the pink inside, y'all would have made $100 million in 10 to 20 years. Like, you running around here dressing up, going to masquerade, breaking into masquerade balls to try to talk to people and banging Andre and doing all this and that. You need to be putting your goddamn thinking cap on and trying to figure out how you can really come up on some wealth while also not shitting on what came before you. Getting the beginning of this episode with grandmother Ernestine performing over multiple decades in the pink, like, it just, to me, solidified how much they really do need to save it. Like, they do need to make sure that it is still here. How can we sit down and have a conversation that talks about preserving the pink while also bringing additional financial prosperity to Chuckalisa? Because what I'm not understanding is why we just think that the only option is to bulldoze this thing. And that's on period. So until Haley comes up with a better plan aside from just selling and walking the hell away back into the abyss and loneliness and probably to be an alcoholic again, because sis is still ain't right, until she come up with some other solutions, I'm not seeing it for her. But this episode wasn't mostly about her, so we can go ahead and move on to the meat and potatoes of this episode, giving everything that needs to be gave. First of all, let's go ahead and give more flowers, more praise, more shine to Jay, Alphonse, Nicholson. I'm obsessed. It's always Lil Murda for me. It's Lil Murda on any day of the week for me. And then Uncle Clifford. Okay, like, they got their episode, y'all. They reunited and it feels so good, y'all. And there's so much that we need to talk about them coming together in this episode, because it's a lot to unpack. They both are in a process of grieving. The only thing that I'm having a little bit of like concern about is them potentially trauma bonding. After watching this episode for like the third time, because I had to go back and rewatch it a few times. Now I'm like, yo, I don't want them to trauma bond, but I don't know if we'll be able to consider it that, because they were bonded beforehand. Like, they really do love each other. However, they both are going through traumatic as hell moments right now, and as Uncle Clifford said, he needed her and she needed him, and that's all fine and good, but we also okay, I'm not gonna say but, I just don't want them to trauma bond, but that we ain't gonna know that until like later on down the line in further episodes. So for right now, we just gonna go ahead with them bonding in the way that they did. Now, when we first see Uncle Clifford in this episode, it's, to meet up with Haley at the pink. She stepped out to go and take care of this business while Lil Murda is back at the house on the damn couch, waking and baking and trying to process, but it's really kind of shaking out of his moment of grief and starting to cry and process, I guess, by hearing grandmother Ernestine cough and move around in the back. So he hops up to go ahead and take care of her. And one of the most endearing moments that we get to see is just like, oh, not they little family, not you just sliding right on in and fitting right on in. And grandmother Ernestine is everything. She's like, you don't want, like, don't be out here doing all this now, because she might get used to you being around. And then she like, yeah, but I'm not the one I'm talking about. And it's so cute to see. She has approved of Lil Murda from the very beginning, but it's so cute to see them interact, even in such a hard moment for her, looking like she's taking a turn. for the worst. But let's talk about Lil Murda, the character in this episode. So it was quite obvious to me how Lil Murda being at Uncle Clifford's house is definitely a safe place for him to be, especially after the incident with Teak, which happened about 3 days ago at this point. However, it's not a place that he has yet been able to fully process and unload. He really is distracted. He's distracted in the showing up for grandmother Ernestine. He's distracted in showing up for Cliff, and both like what Cliff got going on about the pink with Autumn, as well as, you know, Cliff processing her grief around what's happening with grandmother Ernestine. The house pretty much becomes like a hideaway or a world within a world. And I'm assuming that with more time, like as he spends more time there, he'll be able to get to a place of being able to fully reveal and fully release all that he has going on, but he's not able to do so in this episode. But we get doggone close, right? Like by the end of the episode, we get to see Cliff telling Lil Murda, like, you can tell me when you're ready. You don't have to tell me now. Because at the end, after they had this beautiful moment of lovemaking and switching of positions and control, which I do want to talk about a little bit more in depth, so I'm gonna touch on it here but then come back to it. But that morning after, Lil Murda goes to say like that night what happened, like because he asked like, why did you let me back in? And Uncle Clifford's like, because you needed me and I needed you. And then Lil Murda goes on to try to detail what happens and gets overwhelmed and like starts to cry, and Uncle Clifford's like, nah, you can tell me when you're ready, like there's no rush. And while I love that, like I think that that's definitely something Lil Murda needs, I'm also like a little bit anxious, right? Like I'm a little bit anxious, one, for what it looks like for Lil Murda to actually, one, reveal his feelings and start to truly process his grief, because at the end of the day, Teak, I think, was probably Lil Murda's first love. And we had that moment back in last episode where, you know, he was able to reveal exactly what Uncle Clifford meant to him, to Big Teak. And now I'm like anxious because we're going to get at some point when he starts to detail what happened to Teak and then also how he feels about it, what Teak meant to him, to Uncle Clifford. And I'm just like, but it needs to happen, right? Like it totally needs to happen. I think something that keeps me just so locked in and so obsessed with Lil Murda and his storyline is that at every moment he is himself. And he sticks to being the truest version of himself, right? Like whether that's showing up and cooking grandmother Ernestine something really good to eat because Uncle Clifford don't know what the hell she doing and this chicken and dressing ain't hitting, right? Or if it's asking about what the hell Haley do now when Uncle Clifford came back from the pink knowing that Uncle Clifford had met with her, right? Even though he has all of these things going on in his mind, he's processing his grief and low-key avoiding it, right? In that moment, Uncle Clifford makes a note of like, yeah, I heard you crying in your sleep. Like, what's up? And he's like, nah, I wasn't. And he's avoiding it. But like, Lil Murda like literally just shows up as himself at any given moment. And it's really, it's endearing to see. Watching him ask Uncle Clifford, like, what are you? was like, oh my God, I don't even know how to describe how I felt when he asked that question, because while it's a valid question, especially given the tone of what the conversation was that they were having, it also was so layered and so nuanced, and where they went from there, it was just like, oh, it was so in depth, right? But even that, it's like he didn't ask that question to be of any offense. He asked that question with true interest and intention of like learning more, and like with admiration in his eyes and in his voice for Uncle Clifford being able to be this version, this expression of herself, pretty much most, or if not all of her life. And again, the admiration that, you know, is in Lil Murda's voice, and like, yo, you have always been this. It's like, yes. What I will say is when Uncle Clifford followed up a little bit later in the scene, she says, "You asked me what I am without even realizing all that comes along with that answer." And then follows it up with saying, "Don't get me wrong, I love me some me, but people don't understand how lonely it can be to shine so bright." And when I tell you, my jaw hit the floor. Those are like some of the best words that I have heard to be able to encapsulate a feeling that I know all too well. Like, I'm gonna take a side note real quick, y'all, but I've always been like the person doing the most and like adventurous, explorative, like just living out loud and going for it, learning as much as I possibly can. And that has put me in a position with my family, with my friends in my hometown. It puts me in a position to kind of be an outsider, to be the girl who seemingly don't need nobody and like is gonna get things done regardless, is gonna try some new things. Like everyone knows like Erica's gonna figure it out, Erica's gonna be onto some new thing, Erica's with it, whatever. Like that's just the thing. And hearing these words come out of Uncle Clifford's mouth, I'm like, yo, that is exactly it. Because while people can look to you and be like, oh, you're great as this and this and this and this, and you're so amazing, especially like speaking from a space of being a extraordinary black woman or a black woman seeking to live life in excellence, right? It is such a lonely ass place to be when most people don't understand you or don't think as deeply or as intentionally as you do, who don't communicate as effectively as you do, who aren't as empathetic as you are. Like, and this is something that can be applied to people who find themselves on the outside of the norm in any area, but I'm just speaking specifically from my experience. That shit is lonely. And the way that Uncle Clifford equated that to the moment where she was basically dismissed by Lil Murda, and that changed the trajectory of their relationship in that moment when he was sitting down having a meeting with Blue Guap, and you know Uncle Clifford came in and then he basically said his little smart remark and that was it, that was all. Uncle Clifford equates that to being a moment where Lil Murda was not ready to step out into the light and was not ready to shine. And most people aren't. Most people take the easy way out, take a cop out, or avoid accountability, avoid things that basically are going to put the spotlight on them. And that's for good or bad. Like the spotlight doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be positive. It just means that people are going to see you. That specific bout of dialogue really resonated with me. While I have all you amazing subbies, and I have some really great friends and family in my life, a lot of my lived experience, I've had to do things alone, and I'm still doing things for the most part alone because just so many people don't get it or just don't live in the same way that I do. And that's okay. It's just lonely. And I thought that I understood and felt Uncle Clifford before, but it wasn't until these words came out of her mouth that I was like, oh, okay, sis, I really feel you now. And I thought it was a really great analogy to use for Lil Murda and his coming out journey that he's on. Now back to what I was talking about with Lil Murda. This house is going to provide just a distraction for him. He's hiding out here like he hadn't heard from Wody. We get a moment where we actually get to see his social media is blowing up because of the Tina Snow collaboration. Wody has called him and left him 17 text messages, or called him 17 times, text him, left voice messages, all that until he finally answers the phone. And this is another, to me, a confirmation of like, oh, this is really a distraction, because as he's talking to Wody, he has a moment to talk about like, okay, is T's body still there? Because apparently Wody has the body at the funeral home. He's like, oh, I'm gonna have to put him in like an unmarked grave or whatever. He's like, no, we're gonna actually do a funeral for him and we'll get him something. HVH is going to set him off right. He's starting to steep into like his feelings of like longing and grief, but because he hears Uncle Clifford upstairs making a bunch of noise looking for clothes for him. He's shaking out of it, gets off the phone with Wody, and then, you know, rushes to see what's going on there. And then from there, he's able to like really explore Uncle Clifford's room and again, distract himself with the low-key tension, but also support and just vibe that they actually have with each other. I thought it was so dope how he was able to see that Uncle Clifford kept all of the postcards that was sent. So it's so clear, even though at the top of the episode he makes a note to grandmother Ernestine, like, you might have to put a good word in for me with Cliff. It's like you can see exactly what you mean to Clifford and how important you are by all of the things, regardless of the unrespond to texts, regardless of you sleeping on the couch right now, you ain't in the bed, but these postcards are up. Like, you walk in and he's like, oh, this is the lair, and Uncle Clifford's like, yeah, seen by the few and the worthy. He's like, well, I hope I could be worthy. And Uncle Clifford's like, well, you here, ain't you? It was just like, listen, the word, I mean, it's in y'all's whole interaction. Like, don't be nervous, don't be scared. Y'all are making y'all way back to each other. We love to see it. Okay, so in speaking about that, in the making their way back to each other, we get another sex scene in this episode, y'all. And when I tell you, I was blown away by it. I personally don't feel like I am qualified to speak on it, but I'm going to try my best. So if there's anyone who is following me within the queer community who can speak to and clarify things a little bit better, please feel free to do so in the comment section, because I do want to know, and I want to make sure that as much breath and life can be, you know, given to this particular moment in the episode, that it is provided. However, I'm not of the queer community, so I don't really know. I only am going to speak from what I seen and my perspective, but again, that's not of that community, so take it with a grain of salt, I guess. But this sex scene, oh my word. Okay, so let's start off with the lead-in, right? So we got the whole Cisco thing, which is a callback to another joke of like Lil Murda playing like he didn't know who Cisco was, and your hair is definitely platinum, sir, so it's given. But this provides a lighthearted moment. This is from Uncle Clifford crying in the shower, which I'm pretty sure that Lil Murda could hear, and he wants to help her, like, just cheer up, and this is how that happens. So they have a moment where they're able to really laugh and just kiki until, you know, Uncle Clifford is pulled back into grief while they lay on the bed, and she's just like struggling. But Lil Murda doesn't let her just steep in it, right? Like, he pulls her face over so that he can like look her in the eyes and like, I'm here with you. That's what I kind of felt like it was saying, like, I'm here with you. You do not have to like turn away or deal with any of this grief on your own. Like, I'm here with you. And from there, they are able to have a deep moment of intimacy visually and then physically, because they go on to kiss and then they go on into this sex scene. And y'all, it's the choice, one, to not wear condoms, which if y'all aren't already, go ahead and follow the creator of PVALLEY at Katori Hall. I'll link her in the description box down below, but she also goes back after episodes and she'll tweet about specific things that you should know about. And she actually tweeted about the choice for them to not use condoms. And she said, in a world where HIV is still a threat, them deciding to not use protection is an articulation of trust, much the same way that during this time of COVID, choosing to wear a mask is. Sadly, both viruses continue to have disproportionate impact on Black communities. And also the fact that there's an implicit confirmation of negative status for HIV for both parties allows for the consummation to proceed. The P-Valley writers went back and forth about whether or not this would break the scene flow, but decided it was a necessary exchange. And I love that. It was a very strong choice that fit the story, and I was totally here for it. It also, like she mentioned, it just really starts to drum home the level of trust that these two have with each other, right? And then from there, Lil Murda's like, I want to feel you inside me. And I'm just like, not him switching positions, because up until this point, I'm assuming that Lil Murda is always the top. And I don't know, again, I'm not of the queer community, so I don't know how these things work. I'm only assuming based off of like what I have seen and what I have heard, and like my little brain cells putting together what I think. So please clarify for me in the comment section or correct me if I get any of this wrong. But for the most part, what I understand it to be is like when you're a top, you're typically a top, and when you're a bottom, you're typically a bottom, right? And the moment that Lil Murda said that, I was like, not you handing over control. You really, really, oh my mind was so blown in the best way possible. Like, I was just like so ecstatic for them, because to me it just spoke to breaking of barriers within their relationship, solidification of trust. Also, it speaks to Lil Murda wanting to be in a place of just being fully open so that he can walk into a space of being fully free in the real world, right? So like, in my opinion, or like in my imagination, as we're watching this, we're in Uncle Clifford's bedroom, or the house, but specifically the bedroom, which has become a world inside the world where they are 100% safe to be them. It's like, let me get my full expression of myself. Let me explore as much as I possibly can in this safe space before I'm able to go out and do this in the world. And I was just like, oh. And the fact that Uncle Clifford was able to oblige, honey, and was not like, no, well, I'm only a bottom. I'm like, it was just like the passing of, or the submission, right? Like the submitting to one another and their desires and understanding of what each other needed. I think that specifically as they moved into that sexual space, from, you know, Uncle Clifford struggling with these grief-stricken thoughts around grandmother Ernestine, of like being able to be the one doing the penetrating versus receiving, probably was the best fit for her specifically. Given this, like, I don't know, I just, everything about it I loved it. It just showed so much growth, and it also showed for me Lil Murda's desire of like what the future could look like, if that makes sense. And again, anybody who can clear up anything or add additional notes, please do so in the comment section down below. And then all of that is like all of that gets the cherry put on top when, you know, Lil Murda says, fill me up, bruh. And I just equate that to sexy talk, right? So, you know, that's what that is. And again, Katori also mentions this, and her tweets go on to say, and very reflective of these two characters who have consistently used protection. Furthermore, Lil Murda being the more adamant condom user and being the receiver, we wanted to show a deep trust of his partner, for better or worse. Usually the giver, Lil Murda's willingness to be versed for his lover in the intimate missionary position reflects a desire to be open, finding power in vulnerability. Coaxing his lover to climax with naughty words, free both into a cascade of mutual pleasure. Love by Kendrick Lamar scores the moment Lil Murda and Uncle Clifford reconnect. Their relationship started in a heated place, on the back couches and over jukeboxes, and now in Uncle Clifford's lair, they actually make love. Like, it was the fill me up that was just like, oh, okay, this is it. Like, y'all, this scene was playing and I was already like, all right, so what is the wedding gonna look like? Because it's finna be fabulous. It's finna be everything. I really, really, really love this couple, and I love the journey that they have been on. All right, y'all, I'm gonna stop gushing about Uncle Clifford and Lil Murda. Woo, we got 3 more episodes. I cannot wait to see where their relationship goes from here. Now, on to the other majorness of the episode, which is Mercedes and Terica on their whole little journey to figure out what she finna do now that she's pregnant. I'm excited to see where their journey and where their relationship goes. By the end of the episode, we get to see Terica finally calling Mercedes mama when she is used to calling her Sadie's. which makes sense because they literally go on a journey in this episode to one, figure out what Terica can do and is going to do about the pregnancy, but also figuring out themselves and what they actually want and what they actually need. I think in watching this episode, Mercedes had to relive a few things that happened with Patrice. And you know what, before I get in depth and I get real empathetic and open about Terica and Mercedes, I want to take a second to talk about goddamn Patrice Woodbine and this hoochie ass skirt that she was wearing while she was whooping Mercedes ass in this diner after she just tried to pimp her out over some eggs and some goddamn bacon. Like, when I tell y'all, we don't even be getting full-on words from Patrice Woodbine, but even just seeing her in episodes, I am immediately heated. Like, I want to fight her so much. She is literally Raggedy if Raggedy was a fucking person. The more backstory that we get on her, the worse it becomes. In this episode, by way of Mercedes having flashbacks to moments that she was experiencing, we get to see that Patrice Woodbine was out here being ridiculous, basically hooking, didn't have no place for them to sleep. They going from couch to couch, house to house. She wearing short ass skirts that she ain't had no damn business wearing, running around taking Mercedes to diners to eat and don't have no food to don't have no money to actually pay for the food. And then when it comes time to pay for it, gonna say, Mercedes, why don't you go ahead and do what you do so that we can, get the rest of this bill covered. But then the moment that Mercedes pulls out some money and accidentally shows you that she has a condom, now you want to go all types of ape shit and act like she the heathen. Like, I know y'all caught how short this damn skirt this lady is wearing. Like, Patrice Woodbine is an old hoe. And not hoe in any kind of endearing way. Like, I struggle with her. And I'm so glad that Mercedes was able to figure out her way through the mess and the trauma that was her mother, because a lot of what she was doing and a lot of what she has been manifesting has been in line with what her mother was doing too. But by the end of this episode, she's able to make a different decision, which is the decision to give Terica a choice and support her regardless, which I love. Patrice Woodbine never did that. And I think for me, what chaps my ass the worst is like Patrice Woodbine of today sits on her high horse and judges everybody. Everybody is going to hell. Everybody needs to be delivered. Everybody is up for degradation and manipulation. Meanwhile, you are literally a decade maybe out of the worst time in your life, out of your hoeing, out of, like, girl, you like. And now that line makes sense, because there was one time, I think in last season, where Mercedes told Patrice that you was pimping me. And I was like, oh, maybe she's just exaggerating and she was just, I don't know. No, she was pimping her. Patrice Woodbine was pimping her own damn daughter so that she can get a meal here, a little short ass Forever 21 skirt there, and I can't. We get to see Patrice pop up again by way of like hallucinations and flashbacks on Mercedes' part. Aside from like the commercial, right? At the very end, we get to see the commercial because Patrice is running for damn mayor. And I thought that it was interesting how they used Patrice in this episode, because it literally was used as kind of like a haunting for Mercedes, as she is presented with the same air quotes issue that Patrice was presented with. When Mercedes turned up pregnant at 15, Terica turned up pregnant at 14. And Patrice did not give Mercedes a choice. However, by the end of the episode, we're seeing that Mercedes is fully giving Terica a choice. After having a few little close calls with extremism, or seeing her mother in herself and having to check herself, I think this was a very pivotal moment on Mercedes' motherhood journey, because she hasn't fully been able to be Terica's mother, and part of that is by way of like custody and the courts and all the things that she was saying, but also to Terica's point of like, you also didn't show up in times and places that you could have simply just shown up. Like, you're running around here, you want to get this gym, you feel like this gym is going to prove that you can be the best mother that you can be, but nothing outside of you was ever supposed to prove your motherhood. It was literally just you. And I get how, one, Mercedes don't know this because she was not mothered correctly and she was never taught this. But then two, I think it also, for all these years, it provided a really great, like, scapegoat for her to not be able to be accountable for her actions and the things that resulted from her actions. So she could blame her mama, she could blame the court, she could blame Cortez, she could blame Shell. And at the end of the day, similar to like what's happening in this episode and these few days, this like day and a half that we get to see, all you had to do was be present and be here. Everything else doesn't matter, and it would have figured itself out. I enjoyed watching Terica and Mercedes in this episode. There was a few moments where I was like, all right, Terica, now you're getting a little bit big for your britches, boo-boo. But I really, really enjoy what this revelation and this pregnancy did for Terica and Mercedes in their relationship. And I'm looking forward to see what it is like for them moving forward. I will say that I was surprised that Terica decided to go ahead and get the abortion by the end of the episode versus keeping the baby, because I didn't think that she was actually going to do that. And I wonder if there will be any fallout that we explore or any grief that we see her go through after making that decision, because they do a really great job of showing the decision to go and even get the consultation and all the pro-lifers outside the damn outside the damn clinic being who they are. And, you know, the emotions that go into all of that. So I'm wondering if we're going to still follow Terica at any point and see if there's any fallout for her or any regret after making the decision. And that's it, y'all. There was a lot going on in this episode. It wasn't as traumatic as episodes previously. However, it was still very much so heavy in subject matter and story. Grandmother Ernestine gets taken away in the ambulance early on in this episode, and she says, I'm not gonna be coming back. And Uncle Clifford's like, no, they're gonna make you better. I do think that this might be the last that we have seen of Grandmother Ernestine. I do think that she is probably going to succumb from illnesses brought on by her COVID status, but we don't actually get that confirmation in this episode. Be on the lookout for my episode 8 preview as I break down the trailer and my other P-Valley videos talking about specific characters and their storylines. I have a love letter to Lil Murda coming up, and I've been working on this video for a few weeks now, so I cannot wait to share that with y'all. In the meantime, hit the subscribe button and turn on your bell notifications so you don't miss out when that video is up and ready to go. It's your good sis you love to talk TV with. I'll see you in the next one.